Thank you, Minister Pakula and Radik for opening the show, the trade show. What promised to be a pretty exciting few days. Before I invite our next speaker onto the stage, I'll just remind you that get your questions ready. We've got a very interesting topic coming up on food trends. So go into your app and get your questions ready for when we at the end of the session. The next session there's a bit of a slight change to the program. So David from Euromonitor is going to talk a bit about trends in health and wellness. Euromonitor, the big challenge for food companies is to read the pulse of consumers, but it's not just good enough to read them today. You have to anticipate the future and react, and quite often we're getting conflicting signals where on the one hand people are saying they're eating healthier, and yet on the other hand bad for you foods are selling pretty well. So the big challenge is to really understand and read the trends and anticipate them and change your company's strategies accordingly. Euromonitor is at the forefront of feeling the pulse of food around the world. Euromonitor has offices in 15 countries. It monitors the situation in 100 countries of the world and has 1,500 employees. Our first speaker is David Gudgin, the Australasian Director of Euromonitor Australia. David's had a long history with the company. He's been with the company for 25 years. He's had 8 years in the Australian office. Prior to that, he had various roles in the UK, particularly around marketing and so forth. So I'd like to welcome on stage David Gudgin. Thank you.
I will be speaking to you for the next half an hour about global health and wellness trends within packaged food. We're going to take a whistle-stop tour around the world, so hold on. Just to repeat something that David said, but it sets some context for this. We research packaged food markets in 100 countries around the world, bottom up within markets. So we're looking at the size and shape of each category and subcategory within packaged food within those 100 countries. Alongside that, we also split out health and wellness positioning within those packaged food products. And so it kind of gives us a unique ability to look across markets and understand differences between consumers and what's driving them towards buying these products or not. There's quite a few slides, so quite a few charts in this deck. Some of them are quite complicated. I'm going to kind of try and give you the key takeaways from each, but you will be able to download the deck afterwards from the Global Table website. So if you want to study them in more detail, that'll be a good thing to do. Okay. Good, it's working. So what do we mean by health and wellness? I'm going to talk about these 5 categories. Before I start, the really important thing to understand is that this classification is based on the claims made by the manufacturers, by the brand owners. We don't go and check the back of the cereal box to look at the ingredients to see whether it's got added iron in it or not. We take the front of the box and look to see whether the manufacturer is promoting this as a health and wellness product fortified with iron. So, in order of magnitude, fortified functional, worth $170 billion last year in global retail sales. Foods that have some kind of added fortification, protein, probiotics, vitamins, and so on. The next largest is naturally healthy, $110 or so billion. This is foods that are healthy by way of natural ingredients. So that might be honey instead of sugar, or whole grain, therefore high fiber. Better for you. Better for you because something's been taken out. They're taking out the fat. It's low fat, low sugar, low salt, and so on. And then the smallest 2 categories, but actually possibly the most interesting, and that's what we're going to take a look at mostly today. Free from dairy, free from gluten, lactose, meat, and so on, and organic. So overall, we're looking at a global market of around $450 billion a year, last year in fact. Australia and New Zealand accounts for about 10 billion of that. Actually particularly interesting to look at it from this region because it's one of the fastest growing regions in the world. We're expecting to see another 40% added to that 10 billion in the next 5 years. Actually, there's only one region that's growing faster than Australasia, and that's Middle East. So why health and wellness? Well, in value terms, 20% of the global spend on packaged food, retail sales of packaged food, has some kind of health and wellness positioning. So that's $1 in $5 is spent by consumers on something that says it's going to be healthier for them. Okay. Look down there. Okay, we're going to start by taking a look at mindful eating at a global level and some of the trends there. So we know that consumers are taking a more holistic approach to healthy diet. Mindful eating is a big trend driven by product innovation, packaging, ingredients, and as ever, the need for convenience amongst consumers. Back to basics, people looking for natural ingredients, botanicals, traditional recipes getting much more, becoming more popular again. Free from, as we'll come on to see, is skyrocketing. Perceived as healthier, more natural, easier to digest, and absolutely in line with the current desire for plant-based foods. Naturally functional, so consumers looking for functionality that comes from natural ingredients rather than the artificial fortifications. And then finally here, mindful indulgence. Yet another face of opting for healthier lifestyles and healthier alternatives. We still want to indulge, but we want another benefit alongside that. So we're seeing an increase in demand for plant-based ice cream, organic chocolate confectionery. So alongside, I'm just going to take a sip of water. So alongside our industry research, which I've just mentioned, we also conduct consumer research, looking at attitudes around the world. We have a panel of 28,000 consumers in those 100 countries around the world. When we asked, what are your dietary preferences and preferred food attributes, for almost half the respondents, the first answer they give is that it's all natural. But of course, there's no approved definition of natural. There's no regulation around the use of the natural claim. So we then ask them what natural means to them. And does not contain artificial colorings and flavorings or other additives comes out as the top answer. Closely followed by is chemical free, is also organic, and maybe a little bit of confusion coming in here amongst consumers about what the difference is between these different answers. And we'll come back to that in a moment. So, if we start by looking at now I'm going to try and use the laser pointer. No, I don't think we're going to use the laser pointer. The bar chart on the right, on the left-hand side, this is the numbers that I've just been through. So the blue at the bottom there is fortified functional at $170 billion global sales. With the green at the top is organic as the smallest category with $40 billion US. But we're looking at the right-hand side of this, and we can see that which is the year-on-year growth rates for each of those categories, and we can see that the larger categories, better for you, fortified functional, which consumers perceive as more processed, are at the bottom of the pile in terms of growth, really dragging growth, and in fact, better for you there, actually struggling to stay above zero a few years ago. The stars of the show are obviously organic and free from. And this is consistent with the perception that these are less processed, more natural style products. So these trends aren't the same in every region. I'm just going to give you a second to orientate yourself around this chart. So the bars here represent the sales in each region of the world. We've got Asia-Pac on the left, obviously the largest market. And the colors, it's the same color scheme as the previous slide. So fortified functional is the blue at the bottom, going up to organic at the top. So all of the regions are growing. Each of those bar charts has got an upward direction on it. So every region in the world, health and wellness foods is growing. But if we start digging into the detail here, Asia is obviously the largest, but actually only last year overtook the US. Fortified functional continues to have huge potential in Asia-Pac. It's probably the fastest growing category there across the board. But also and I wish this would work, no, I'm not going to try it again. Also in Latin America and Middle East and Africa, we're seeing that growth in fortified as well, and we'll dig into that in a bit. But in these regions, fortification is still seen as a way of combating malnutrition. So that fortification label is still seen as a value add and is driving growth. But in Western Europe, North America, absolutely stagnant growth, and in fact a decline in North America in the fortification category. Okay. So before we finish with the kind of global overview of health and wellness, we're going to take a quick look here at per capita. So health and wellness foods, obviously significantly more expensive. That's kind of the point in terms of manufacturing these. We want some value add. We want to be able to charge more for them. So no surprise to see that North Americans, Australasia comes high up on this chart, Western Europe, all spending a significant amount on health and wellness positioned foods. But look at Asia-Pac here. Yeah, second up from the bottom, a tiny per capita spend, and with the much talked about rising middle class in Asia, it's already the largest market for health and wellness. It's going to absolutely dwarf the rest of the world. So, just to dive into free from in a bit more detail. Again, I might give you a second to orientate on this. We're looking at growth rates for the health and wellness categories across the world. So, looking at the dark blue circles, free from, consumers avoiding dairy, going off gluten, embracing plant-based alternatives. Free from category is the fastest growing category in all these regions. And that's driven by the perception that free from is a more natural and healthier option than the other health and wellness positionings. Of course, the eagle-eyed members of this audience will have already spotted that Asia-Pac is the exception here. In fact, free from is the slowest growth category within Asia-Pac. Whose fault is it? China. China's got the largest free from dairy market in the world, in line with its high rate of lactose intolerance. And it was a decline in China that actually dragged down the whole of Asia-Pac here. Nestle's peanut milk, Yinlu, is a key factor responsible. They've suffered a huge decline in sales, $4 billion decline in sales in China. And that's dragged down this whole thing. It seems that increasing awareness of healthy lifestyles, along with concerns about the high levels of sugar in these products, has turned consumers away from them. Organic, the green circles here, also really healthy growth across all regions, and we'll come on to organic in a second. But just back to China's free-from category, although it's suffered over the last 5 years with those concerns around health and sugar and in the free-from category, we're expecting it to recover quite significantly. Here we're looking at absolute dollar growth over the next 5 years. So China adding $6.5 billion over the next 5 years to its annual sales of free-from foods. So if we, this is now split by, down to the next level, which is the free-from subcategories. So free from allergens, meat, gluten, lactose, and so on. So we can see that growth in China is going to be driven, almost, well, in fact, slightly more than half of that growth in China will be driven by free-from meat products, specifically free-from meat substitutes. So these products aren't just consumed as alternatives to meat. Obviously, they're a key part of a regular kind of traditional Chinese diet. Soy-based products used in a wide variety of traditional dishes. But as such, it means that this category is going to benefit from population growth as well as the healthy living trend. So also playing into this, in 2016, the Chinese government issued health advice advising people to cut their meat consumption by half. On top of this, 2019, the year of the pig, there are many campaign groups trying to persuade people to stop eating pork. I mean, meat is still a huge industry in China, but these things are all playing out into the free-from space and specifically free-from meat, which is going to drive that growth. So just to look at a quick look at the innovation in this space. We're looking at here on the left at some traditional Chinese tofu style products, alongside the new meat alternatives that are being rolled out across the world. Beyond Burger, made from peas. This isn't news to anyone, I'm sure. Impossible Burger, with its secret ingredient that makes it look, smell, and taste just like meat. But it's interesting, the early success of these products it goes counter to the natural trend that I've been talking about here. And actually, our research is showing that people's choice to buy these meat alternatives is driven more from concerns around environment and sustainability than it is around specifically health. Just 2% of our global consumer panel eat 100% vegan diet. But actually 20% will regularly eat a vegan meal. So it's that flexitarian space, people who want to reduce their meat intake but don't necessarily want to become 100% vegetarian. Just as gluten-free, there are some people who need to eat gluten-free, but there are other people who look on and say, well, if it's healthy for you, then it must be healthier for me to choose that option. Not necessarily. I'm not qualified to comment on that. So another interesting trend is the emergence, or I should say re-emergence, of ancient grains. So here we've got Nestlé's Yes free from gluten fruit and nut bars, incorporating ancient grain quinoa. And then from Spain, Viva Soy, with their two variants of free from dairy milk, one incorporating spelt, the other quinoa again. So playing to the perception that if our ancestors ate it and our ancestors are all really healthy, then it must be healthy for me, it must be good for me. Another one to watch, Notco, a Chilean startup, actually with funding from Jeff Bezos. They have an artificial intelligence-powered software that analyzes food at a molecular level to identify plant-based molecules that can replace animal molecules in food. So this is their Not Mayo, where the computer algorithms have told them that egg whites can be replaced with chickpea water to give this, as close as possible the same texture, taste, and smell. Also on the way, not milk, not ice cream, not cheese, and so on. So moving on to organics. This is actually a screenshot from our online research portal, Passport. If we start on the right, the bar chart on the right-hand side, this is the 40 billion global sales of organic packaged food that I mentioned earlier, split by region. So the largest region by far, North America. In fact, $16 billion of that 40 is specifically US. But we can see Asia-Pac on the rise, and in fact, the story here is it's the Western world plus China. So Western world plus China. So if we look at growth rates, so here, on this chart we've got growth rates across the horizontal axis against per capita spend on the vertical axis. The size of the bubble is the size of the market, so what we've just seen on the previous slide. So Denmark, highest per capita spend, but still a very small market, still a very small low growth rate. Really, the interesting things here are Canada, France, and China, the fastest growing, and of course China is the fastest growing. But these are quite different markets, so just into a bit of detail on this. Here, the size of the box represents dollar sales, and the color represents growth. So the darker the color, the faster the growth. So we can see that everything's growing. Everything's shaded blue in some shade or other. But and I've not added too many labels here, but really the point is to show the difference between China and the other two markets. China not very fragmented here. In fact, there aren't many organic packaged food products available in China, and obviously dominated by milk. Organic infant formula, the fastest growing category. And the key driver here in China is food safety. Organic perceived as being safer to eat, safer to consume. France and Canada, a different story. Far more fragmented here, far more segmented. Perception of organic offerings as being more natural and fresh, with categories like cheese and breakfast cereals expected to be the fastest growing. But targeting foods here which play to culture or ingrained in culture is important. So traditional charcuterie, bread, cheese in France, some of the fastest growing categories. It's not on this slide, but organic pasta. Organic pasta in Italy is the fastest growing category there. And traditional will be important in China too. So too small to show on this chart, but organic rice, very, very small right now, but absolutely, skyrocketing in terms of growth rate. So we expect to see that emerging soon. So what's next in organics? As I mentioned earlier, there's a bit of confusion around what the organic claim actually means. And interesting to see some traditional organic companies switching their positioning here. So On the left here, this is Arla Foods, have rebranded their organic milk as free range. So thinking that that's a clearer positioning in the eyes of consumers. Green and Blacks, which have always been well known for organic chocolate confectionery, here launching, in fact, a couple of years ago now, the Velvet range, which is no longer organic, still clean label and ethically sourced, but no longer organic. Fortification, as we've seen, losing traction in Western Europe and North America, but huge and growing fast in Asia-Pac. So just to, again, look at a complicated slide. Here we've got the top 10 largest forecast growth markets for fortified foods, ranked by absolute dollar growth over the next 5 years, and ranked left to right. So the largest on the left, China, is a $40 billion market, and which is the top of the top columns are the next 5 years. The bottom is the absolute growth over the next 5 years. So this is being driven by fortified infant formula and probiotic yogurt. On a smaller scale in the US, we see growth from fortified energy bars, sweet biscuits, flavored milk drinks, and again, probiotic yogurt. And then Argentina, which is the last one I'm going to pick out on this slide, actually the fastest growth, but obviously a very small base right now, growth from sweet biscuits, fortified sweet biscuits, fortified energy bars, and pasta. I mentioned earlier about addressing malnutrition through fortification in emerging markets. This is a great example from India, where Nestle, as part of its Good Food, Good Life program, is fortifying instant noodles with iron and Milo with vitamins and minerals. So just to take a quick look at health and wellness by prime positioning. So things like digestive health, vision health, immune support. Here we're looking at global sales by prime positioning, and the blue spots represent the historic growth rate. So bone and joint health, over on the left there, completely out of fashion. In fact, declining by 3% a year for the last 5 years. Cardiovascular, oral, respiratory, weight management not faring much better. But clearly the star here is the energy positioning. 9% growth, or average of 9% growth year on year for the last 5 years. And this is consistent with that contemporary health and wellness lifestyle. Consumers moving away from weight management, adopting a more holistic approach to healthy diet, and being increasingly proactive in their attempts to stay active for as long as possible. And when we think about energy boosting, a clear candidate here is energy bars. So this chart on the left-hand side is the same format again. So the size of the box is dollar sales. The color of the box is the growth rate. The darker the color, the faster the growth. Might be easier just to put it down there. No surprise that the US is dominating the global market for energy bars. Probably nearly 3/4 of global sales are in the US, and they're still getting reasonable growth there. The only declining markets, in fact, across the countries that we research are South Korea, Austria, and Egypt. But this consumer shift towards a more natural offering is also coming through here in the energy bars. And new products including new ingredients that are naturally rich in protein. So whey protein has been the traditional source of protein in these products, and now we're seeing a shift to plant-based protein. So this is, at the top here, is Post Power Bar in the US, featuring 10 grams of fat, 10 grams of protein from cashews, almonds, and peanuts. And then Think Thin products following that launch with a plant-based only version of their own. And this move to clean label plant-based protein is likely to continue to thrive as consumers are continuing to look for a more natural snacking option. So just to wrap things up, a look quickly beyond food. Consumers are more educated than ever, taking greater ownership of self in a kind of longer-term sense, preventative sense. Increasingly more educated about what's healthy and what isn't. They're reading online, subscribing to blogs, using apps to count their daily steps, and a whole host of other apps to do other things health-wise. Personalization, it's no longer just what is healthy, it's specifically what's healthy for me versus what's healthy for someone else. So technology and research allowing people or offering people personalized nutrition plans, DNA testing, identification of allergies and intolerances that perhaps previously they wouldn't have been aware of. We expect to see the meal preparation kits moving into this space. So not just an easy, convenient, home-cooked meal solution, but specifically a natural, home-cooked meal that's designed specifically for my health profile. Status is important as ever. It's not only about the food we eat, but about following an active lifestyle. Gyms becoming the new social clubs, exercise becoming more of a social event than ever. Technology also playing a part. New cooking utensils coming onto the market to facilitate healthier lifestyle. Machines to help you make your own fermented food, air fryers, multi-cookers. Not to mention the Fitbits and the plethora of apps available to help you track your own health. And of course, we don't only have to look after our bodies, it's our minds as well. Relaxation, meditation, stress management, sleep control, all rising trends. The rise of tech in the last 10 years has led to FOMO, fear of missing out. The next decade could be all about JOMO, joy of missing out. So just to sum up, free from, consumption of these products has moved way beyond intolerance. Health-conscious attitudes, fashionable eating have consolidated this into the overall driver of growth for the health and wellness space. And we expect this to continue. Organic has gained in popularity as a more natural and sustainable offering in US, Western Europe. And we're expecting fast growth from France, China, and Canada. In China, a different driver, food safety. The downside here, lack of clarity about consumers' understanding of what organic actually means. And would it be better to have a different, an animal welfare positioning or a sustainability positioning rather than organic? Fortified, losing traction in Western Europe and North America, but absolutely huge in emerging markets and especially APAC and China. Probiotic yogurt set to remain a hot trend here. And finally, energy. A key element of contemporary holistic lifestyles, There's been a massive movement away from the concept of weight management towards adopting a diet and a lifestyle that keeps you active and energetic. Energy bars being the key winner here within this trend. Natural, and especially with that natural energy positioning, plant-based energy, set to skyrocket in the next few years. So that was, I promised you a whistle-stop tour. I hope I gave you one. And yeah, I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, David, for a very informative session. We're going to take some questions from the floor, but before we do that, I just wanted to ask you, David, it seems to be that Australia seems to be lagging behind the rest of the world, particularly Asia, with organic foods and better for you foods. I mean, we're high in per capita consumption, but the category is pretty small. I mean, there seems to be a swing back to full cream milk and butter and things that are less healthy for you, and yet everyone's saying they're eating healthier. What does that mean for us? I mean, does that mean that it's a long way to go? Are people prepared to pay a premium for organic foods? What do you see that? Why is there a difference between Australia and particularly Asia Pacific?
I can't answer that question without talking about population size. Yeah, we'll get that one out of the way. I think the natural positioning that I've been talking about here is a key here. The confusion of what organic is clearly an issue, and I think it's as much an issue here as anywhere else in the world. But we are seeing growth. I mentioned at the beginning that there's a $4 billion expected growth in the next 5 years out of 10 billion, so that's the 40% growth. But I think the industry has to be a bit more innovative. I think things are tested in this market, perhaps half-heartedly, and there needs to be a bit more strength behind that, I think.
Okay, thank you. We have some questions from the floor. The first question is, if we're to leave this segment, given that we've got a reputation in the global markets for clean and green foods, should we be really pushing the wellness and better for you as a branding proposition?
Well, that's a really interesting question, isn't it? Because I'm talking about health and wellness and these specific products, but there's a question mark about whether these products are healthy. And the Yinlu milk example in China is a classic example. It's free from dairy. It's supposed to be healthy, but it's packed full of sugar, and that's always the offset, isn't it? If the one positioning, we take out the fat, but we're going to add a load of salt. We take out the salt, but we're going to add a load of sugar, and so on. And so that's another question mark, I guess, for another session about whether how healthy these foods are and how they should be positioned. Yeah.
But on that point too, I mean, what about GMO? I mean, I don't know whether your work picks up on GMO, but Tasmania, for example, is free from GMO. Other states are moving towards it. Is it a good idea for us? Is it a competitive advantage for us to really push the GMO as a branding proposition?
That was actually the fourth answer on our global survey. Beyond, I want it to be natural. I want it to be, and so on. Can't remember the exact ones now. But yes, GMO. I think it's a difficult positioning again. It's a bit like organic. And until someone can really define it well and get some kind of global agreement on what it is, and that's only the first step. The second step is finding a really simple, easy positioning for consumers that they understand. And I think if you think about something like energy boosting, I instantly know what that's for. And if I buy this, it's going to give me energy. I can buy into that. But GMO, what's it doing for me? And I think that's where the thought needs to go.
Okay, thank you. I want to take some questions from the floor. Are there any questions from the floor of David?
I was interested to know your thoughts on grass-fed, because that seems to be a growing trend in the United States, and there's some clear markers about what that means in certification terms. How do you see that panning out across the region here?
I don't have any data to hand on that. Yes, it's a growing trend. It will still have that same issue around what it means. because it can be interpreted in different ways. I think actually it may be about animal welfare positioning rather than necessarily grass-fed. We don't yet know whether it's a fad or a trend, and I think that's only time will tell there. Yeah.
Question over there. Yeah.
Diet philosophies like Whole 360 or Paleo or Keto, etc. What are you seeing in terms of trends of those in different markets around the world and the way they're driving people to eat?
Nothing to hand, I'm afraid. I can't really answer that one. I'm not going to guess. So.
Any other questions?
Thanks very much. You touched on organic and a few other things that are sort of near sustainability but aren't really sustainability. You haven't talked on that very much. Could you just elaborate a little bit on consumer sentiment in relation to sustainability?
I think again I'd need to pull some data on that to give you a proper considered answer. Yeah.
Questions?
Any other questions? Question down the front here.
One more here.
Hi, thank you. Just in touch of the reducing in meat consumption in China, I from my understanding, it's actually increasing. So maybe pork consumption will decrease, maybe, but then the beef demand is high. And also because the soybean has been in China for so many years. So why do you predict in 5 years that the meat consumption will decrease and the plant-based consumption will increase?
The forecast there is we're not forecasting a decline in meat. In fact, we're forecasting an increase in all meat. This goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning. This is about the positioning that the producer puts on a pack. So I think a number of things have combined here. So meat is still huge and it's growing and it will continue to grow for a number of different reasons. People have been encouraged to reduce their meat, which is playing through into consuming more of these alternative products, which we are seeing. But of course, it's all about the manufacturer and the label they put on it. So we could have a soy-based product, which previously didn't have a marketing positioning around meat-free, which now they've just put that label on it. And so then it gets captured within our data on meat-free. So there's a few different things happening there, but actually we were looking at absolute growth in dollar terms. So actually both are growing, and there's a changing positioning in terms of how the consumers are perceiving that.
But David, should the meat producers be worried?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Look, we've talked a lot about the Chinese Asian market, but what about India? I mean, India at the moment is a small market for wellness foods. Is it going to take off in the future? What's the barrier there? Is it an income issue, or what's the issue there?
Yep, income definitely is always an issue there. And probably still further behind the curve in a sense, in terms of nutrition and fortification being the kind of key driver there. And I think that's going to stay for a while before free from or organic become opportunities.
Okay. Just another question about the China market. There's always an issue with integrity of labelling in China. How do we, if Australian companies go and promote themselves as being organic or fortified or whatever, how do we protect our intellectual property and protect our integrity?
Absolutely, and we do a lot of consulting work around this. Not necessarily with organic, but it's an issue. I haven't got a solution to it, unfortunately. But it's going to require a lot of people to work together, I think, in terms of legislating and agreeing at a political level what those rules should be and how they should be policed, I guess.
Look, this morning's address, John Kerrin talked about the sustainability of our food system. Do you think Australia is sort of fast enough to get onto the trends, and do you think we're adapting and really pick up on this wellness and so forth? Or is that an opportunity? What are we lagging behind? Why are we lagging behind?
Absolutely, and it's about innovation. It's about the ambition and the will to win. I think. I mentioned one of the numbers I mentioned. 20% of global spend on packaged food has some kind of health and wellness positioning. I think if people aren't right now playing to that, then they're missing a trick. Definitely.
Okay. We've got time for one last question from the floor. Okay, well, I think we've sort of probably over-enthused the audience, so thank you very much. David, the Euromonitor, is always, as I said, is at the forefront. They've got some great information, so thank you very much. It's a great resource, and thank you, David. And we're going to break for lunch now and wander around and have a look at the trade show. We're back at this stage here at about 2:15. If you wander in a bit after, it'd be great. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.